Hey everybody, this is Cameron, and today myself and Anna Parrington from the televisionlady.com is going to do a commentary for David Lynch's 1999 masterwork, I think at least, The Straight Story. How's it going, Anna?
It's going well. I'm excited. This is one of my favorites.
So let me just ask you first up, you being a David Lynch fan, how did you discover this film?
I want to say my husband went to go see it in the theater when it first came out in '99 and came home just, ranting about it in a good way.
Raving about it.
Raving about it in a good way. I didn't get to it in the theater, but I just, from what he said, I knew it was something that I was going to like. Once it came out on video, we got it and watched it. I loved it. I was, a little bit surprised with how it went, just kind of the overall theme of the film. I didn't know at the time that it was based on an actual story of a guy who did the thing that we're going to see. Just being a Midwestern person, I think we're just kind of all interested when our people get a little bit of press. It's not an outrageous or, really explosive kind of a story, but it's one that I think touched a lot of people around here, especially I'm from Minneapolis, grew up in small town Minnesota. So all these environments, all these settings, just kind of the whole vibe of the film was something that felt very comfortable for me. And I think that was a lot of people's experiences around here anyway.
Now, you were a David Lynch fan prior to this, so did you not see it in the theater because you didn't know he made it, or were you aware that he had made it before? I mean, when did you discover that he was responsible for making this film?
Oh, not until, after my husband saw it and explained to me. I was probably just starting school at the time, and all the films that I was watching or spending my time going to were the ones, that were assigned to me. So I didn't have a lot of time or money to do anything else. But yeah, once I found out it was a David Lynch film, you kind of go into it maybe in a certain mindset, knowing that beforehand, like sometimes it's just fun to go to a film and know nothing about it. That wasn't my experience just because, the buzz had already been around for quite a while. But I did have the experience of bringing this film to a group of viewers who kind of half and half of them knew it was a David Lynch film, but hadn't seen it. The other half knew nothing about it at all. And so it was just kind of fun to see those two sides of a, film experience. Both have merit, both are interesting. So, yeah, but my experience was, I loved it. I loved it from start to finish, and it's tender, it's sentimental, and it's, like I said, it's very, humble, which is not necessarily so in any of Lynch's other works. So I feel like in the canon, this one really stands out for a lot of reasons, but especially those.
It does seem like this film is, even though it is based on a true story, it does seem like it is as autobiographical as Lynch could make a film. Because he always talks about, we've always heard about, Philadelphia and, that spawned Eraserhead and, moving to LA and all that. But this film seems born of his memories of growing up prior to art school.
Sure.
He always talks about, living in all these different Midwestern states and even parts of the Pacific Northwest that would later play into Blue Velvet and Twin Peaks. Mm-hmm. There is definitely a time and place in this film. Even though it is a quote unquote modern film, it easily could have been in the 50s.
Sure.
It could have been at the time that he was growing up. I think there's elements of this film that carry over into, let's say, Twin Peaks: The Return. What's that? There's a beeping sound going on.
Oh, what is that?
Is that the microwave or the fire alarm?
All right, we're on it.
Okay. So I came to this because obviously I was a huge fan of him. I was managing at a movie theater at the time, and we got the film. and it was just so extraordinary, to see it, the poster, and then the poster isn't what was on the VHS cover. The VHS cover was like Richard Farnsworth and Sissy Spacey kind of like smiling, with the tractor. The poster, which I have on my wall, but it's blocked right now, is just a shadow image of the tractor going across, or a silhouette picture of the tractor going across a highway.
Okay, I've seen that.
And then when the DVD came out, it had just this, like, just, you could just tell it was a David Lynch picture that he took.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought this was kind of a classy way. This has never been released to Blu-ray. It is only on DVD, although you can now see it streaming on Disney Plus, which is great, and everyone should see it.
I agree.
So a lot of people got a kick out of it that it said Walt Disney presents a David Lynch film,
Right.
and the fact that it was G-rated, which today this movie would probably be PG, if not PG-13, for all the smoking.
Sure.
Because movies get rated R just for smoking. They would probably go a little more lenient on this, but this was a G-rated film. I remember telling people coming in going, "Oh, David Lynch sold out," before they would see the film, and I said, "This isn't David Lynch making Air Bud." This is, in actuality, he made this film, and then I believe it was at the Cannes Film Festival, or around, or another festival around that particular time, Disney saw it and acquired it.
Okay.
So it wasn't like they took the project to Disney and then Disney financed the David Lynch film. They only paid for it afterwards to distribute it.
Sure.
The other thing that people don't know about this film was that he shot Mulholland Drive just before. Now, much like we talked about Wild at Heart, where he shot the Twin Peaks pilot and then went and shot Wild at Heart and then came back and did the series. He shot Mulholland Drive. And then while they were editing that and getting that together for ABC, The Straight Story plopped in his lap. He did it. And then when he came back, ABC had rejected Mulholland Drive. So then he spent the next year trying to acquire the rights to film some new footage for it, and then they released it 2 years later as Mulholland Drive. But Mulholland Drive was already shot by the time he did The Straight Story, which is quite fun. I think that this film does something extraordinary, which is it wears its heart on its sleeve, but it doesn't ever try to be sentimental. It just is truthful and sentimental, which is really hard to do. And I think, look, David Lynch is a master of imagery. Angelo Badalamenti delivers one of his greatest scores for the film. But without the actors in this film, there is no film. If he had not gotten Richard Farnsworth to be in this film, there is no The Straight Story.
I'm with you. Yeah.
He injects that performance with so much heart. And of course, we now know that, I think he would have done it anyway, but because he knew that this was probably going to be his last performance, it almost feels like a last will and testament of like how to be a decent person.
Well, and what a message, to leave us all with.
Yeah. Now you talk about the Midwest. I also think that Lynch, this was coming off, 96, Billy Bob Thornton came out of nowhere with Sling Blade. And then that was followed by Robert Duvall making The Apostle. So there was a sort of movement of like telling stories that didn't center in Los Angeles and New York at that time.
Sure.
So Lynch was able to kind of ride that wave to get, because otherwise this seems like a film that would be next to impossible to get financing for. There's no bad guy.
Right.
Except the passage of time, which is something that Twin Peaks: The Return would come back to, the idea of the passage of time. And also even at the end, towards the end of season 3 when Cooper says goodbye to Bushnell Mullins in the hospital. It's almost word for word a scene from The Straight Story of him saying goodbye to one of the neighbors that was so nice to him.
Wow.
So let's see. Excuse me. Hang on. Jay Carr out of the Boston Globe writes, this is his quote on the DVD box: David Lynch makes simplicity seem pure, eloquent, and deeply moving. So this film does not have a big plot, does not have twists and turns. It pretty much is a straight story, even though the guy's named Alvin Straight.
Right.
So it's kind of this wonderful thing of like having this guy's name be straight, so it's the straight story. But it is literally a straight story. It's a straight line to a blood relative. To people who say, oh, this is David Lynch's normal film like The Elephant Man, and, it's not one of his weird movies. Yes, it's not one of his weird movies because it's not a mystery. It's not a surreal mystery. But that doesn't mean that the characters are flat.
Right.
That there's no eccentricity to this story. I mean, the opening 5 minutes of The Straight Story, it could have been Blue Velvet too. I mean, the way he establishes the town and the neighbor eating the snowball,
There are those little moments. I'm with you. Yeah.
Right. And even the woman who, hits the deer, all the time. It's those little moments. So Lynch is still bringing it. It's just that, there's no room to all of a sudden have the log lady show up and, and do that. And it would be, and good for him for not doing that kind of stuff, because nobody. This movie is, in my opinion, as perfect as it could be. Apparently, there was a lot more shot for it, like a lot of David Lynch's films, but he said most of the footage centered around comedy bits, and he felt like they kept intruding on the film because the film wanted to be heartfelt, and so he kept scaling those comedy bits back until what we have now. The film's still funny, has a lot of humor in it.
It does.
But I can see how it would be a delicate balance if you just kept playing the comedy, especially towards the second half of the film. Starts getting really, really emotional as we go through.
Right.
So I think it's an extraordinary film, and I'm looking forward to talking about it with you.
Absolutely.
So you're all geared up?
All geared up.
All right. So I'm going to hit play here. And I'll tell you when. So again, guys, you can find the DVD, or you can just watch it on Disney Plus and watch along with us.
I think it's also available for purchase on Amazon Prime if you are a subscriber to that.
And maybe Vudu as well.
Okay.
I think so. Let's see. It's taking a minute, so forgive me. All right. Hit play.
Alrighty.
So, again, one of the great, credits in recent memory is saying Walt Disney presents a film by David Lynch. I mean, it's just, that right there is just like, what? So here, what I love is it begins right away with like an image from The Elephant Man, even Dune. This idea of the stars at night, plays a big role in this film, but it also is a carryover. It's a thematic image that Lynch will carry over for a lot of his work. And this score by Badalamenti is, look, we always praise him for his work and, Blue Velvet and Twin Peaks, and rightfully so, and Wild at Heart, but Lynch and Badalamenti are going basically into uncharted territory with this film, because Badalamenti did not work with Lynch on The Elephant Man. That was John Morris. That was coming out of Mel Brooks's canon wheelhouse. So, what do you think about the score in this film, and how it differentiates from maybe Badalamenti's other work?
Well, I mean, the easy area to talk about, I feel like, is all those nice little kind of country twangs. Like I said, I mean, it's Midwestern, obviously, going from Iowa to Wisconsin, but there are farmers around. Country music or folk music is still a really big deal, even now. And so that was one of the first things I remembered back when I saw this the first time, is kind of Elvie's traveling music kind of just stayed with me. Some guitars and I think maybe some fiddling, like a lot of open stops, double stops on the fiddle. It's just a really comforting score. And there's a reason for that in music, that the 1 and the 5 played together are very grounding. It's a very grounding chord to play, or an interval to play. And whether or not, Badalamenti did this on purpose, the score just is very comforting and grounding. And to come back to what you were saying about kind of like the stars and, the natural world, that's a really big part of this too. So together with that music and then, the landscapes that he's going across, it's almost like, they had to give credit to these things, because the landscapes, all these natural, landforms everywhere he's going, it's like you said, there's no bad guy, but it is a threat to him. Something bad happens, his lawnmower breaks down, if the terrain gets rough,
the semis going past him,
right?
You feel like it's almost like the shark in Jaws, or the truck in Duel, or something like that. It's like there is a persistent danger, because we know, an elderly man, he could be easily, pushed over or run off the road, but he's got such determination. I love these opening images of the small town. Obviously, it's it's establishing where we are in the Midwest, but it's also how David Lynch would establish Blue Velvet. It's not as Norman Rockwell and picturesque, but we do get the Lynchian touch of the wide angle of the street with looks like 10 dogs just running down the street, But it's like, I remember showing this movie to a friend of mine, and she said he had to let the dogs just run down the road. I mean, it's such a David Lynch moment, but at the same time, though, it doesn't ring false. Right. It's just a Lynchian touch, but it's an appropriate Lynchian touch. Right.
No hands in the mouths of the dogs here.
No. But then we get the house and and the woman outside eating the snowball, the hostess snowball, I think it's called. Again, very green grass. It's very, without it being Blue Velvet, it's definitely like bringing you back to those moments. Yeah. It's almost like, well, this is the kind of imagery that would inspire Blue Velvet from Lynch and all that. So now I think this movie, and it's not a knock against it, but I think it starts a little slow just to kind of get you into it. Mm-hmm. And then once you find out that his brother Lyle has had a stroke, I believe, then we kind of know where we are and what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. We don't maybe know about the where the story is going to go, but we now know this story has a purpose.
Yeah. It takes its time. That's okay.
Well, it does. It's a film that completely takes its time, but it never overstays its welcome. It's not like it's like, oh, can we just get on with this? We enjoy these characters. Mm-hmm. Now Sissy Spacek has a supporting role in this film, and she's mostly in the front of the film, and because once Alvin goes on his journey, she kind of recedes in the background. Mm-hmm. One, I think it's a very understated, great performance by her, but also, Sissy Spacek and her husband Jack Fisk, who is a production designer, he's worked with Brian De Palma and Terrence Malick, but most importantly too, him and Sissy Spacek both worked on Eraserhead. Okay. And Jack Fisk is, one of David Lynch's oldest friends, and they hadn't worked together in years. And so, and then also getting Freddie Francis to do the cinematography, who Lynch had worked with on The Elephant Man and Dune. Mm-hmm. This whole film felt like a reunion of old friends coming together to make this story, which is what the story is all about. Mm-hmm. So, So when you when you were teaching this film, what observations were you conveying to the class about, let's say, this opening section?
Well, I think a lot of what you covered already was the basis for a lot of our discussions, just that kind of slow approach, moving camera, taking time with the plot. What are we seeing here? Like that opening shot is, depending on, how familiar you are with David Lynch or, just films in general, it can kind of seem like it's suspenseful or building up towards something, maybe something sinister, you just don't know. And then we find out that, here he is on the floor, we're getting the news. But in this case, when we talked about this film, it was a class of people who are all older than me. I'd say most of them were in their 60s and above. And they really enjoyed that. They really enjoyed the slow kind of reveals. They really enjoyed, some of the longer shots, just some of the ways we were talking about, how the film takes its time. So then when you finally get the characters and the interactions and the dialogues, they were fine. It was like they were just kind of enjoying it, and then boom.
Yeah, I think this film works. I mean, I think it works with pretty much anybody with an open mind, open heart, but I think it also, it hits a particular demographic much harder, I think, than maybe someone who's like 18 or 19. Not saying that an 18, 19-year-old couldn't grasp what this movie is talking about, but I think there's something about the haunting of time and the passage of time, and also regrets and holding grudges. And because I remember when people were coming out of this movie at the movie theater, a lot of senior citizens were they were preparing. I could hear them saying they're going to go home and call their relatives or someone they hadn't talked to in a while.
Wow.
And I'm sure David Lynch has heard this over and over again. Maybe he has, maybe he hasn't. But I think that in many ways, this is his. While obviously Blue Velvet and Twin Peaks and all that will obviously get the accolades they richly deserve, I think that this movie ultimately could be his most important film, not necessarily in terms of what it brought to cinema, but I think this movie has healed a lot more people's relationships with family members than Lost Highway does.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like that, physical ailments, like you said, the passage of time, absolutely. But, there is just that kind of deep, dark, not often talked about aspect of getting older that, we're eventually going to realize that your body starts to break down. You start having these aches and pains, and with Alvy, he's obviously, advanced in age, and just that kind of slow pan across all of those medical supplies. I feel like
that's like a horror show when he's in the doctor's office. It's like, oh my goodness,
Mm-hmm.
He's just going to walk around with a double cane. And, one thing that is I've only seen this mentioned once in one other place, and I believe it was in Film Comment, but I haven't seen anybody else mention this, which is interesting. And that is his daughter, Rose. They talk about how her kids got hurt in a fire. Mm-hmm. And that so she lost custody of her kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he says someone was watching them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't really put this together, but it is kind of hinted at that Alvin was drunk and the kids got hurt on his watch, and that he feels extremely guilty because he feels like he's the reason why Rose doesn't have her kids anymore. It doesn't say that explicitly, but he does talk a lot about how he had he used to be very angry and get drunk a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie is full of unspoken emotions, and I think that's one that seems to be kind of haunting Alvin. Because I mean, who else is supposed to be watching the kids?
Mm-hmm.
It could be it could be somebody else, or it could be Alvin. They don't explain it,
Right.
but it would fit into his background of always wanting to make amends for the bad things that have happened in his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Guilt. He's the older of the two brothers, or the brothers in this, right?
No, I think Lyle.
Lyle's older. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, even so, that sense of responsibility, or if he's driven by guilt, either one of those things, Rose lives with him, or lives. I mean, these responsibilities now that he's taking seriously. Yeah, they could be just because, big families, people have to do that, or something happened, like you pointed out. It could have been that, during the heavy drinking days with the grandkids. Now, this is his cross to bear, he's got to take care of his people.
There's also a scene that happens later in the film, which I think is another scene that really helped a lot of people, are Alvin and the other older gentlemen sitting at the bar talking about their war experiences.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that we hadn't really seen in a film before. And, this coming right after, let's say, Saving Private Ryan, a year before.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of still in the cultural zeitgeist about that. So, in a way, I think this is David Lynch's film, obviously about the passage of time, about getting older. But I think it's also about honoring a generation of people that, who knows if these kind of morals and way of life, will continue once, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Life moves pretty fast, and Alvin seems to be part of a generation that stops and smells the roses instead of just going by at 80 miles an hour.
True. Well, I think that's an important point also when you think of the journey, his journey to his brother, how much of that kind of then either allows or unlocks this, maybe retrospective kind of reflection of, I'm gonna remember the stuff from my life because I'm with this guy who's talking about the war, or because I'm with this group of bikers who are asking me questions like, what was it like, Alvy? And would he have been able to share those things? Would he have been able to get it all off his chest had he not done this journey? Like the journey as an event that unlocks this part of his humanity, and then your point about how it did that for the viewers in the audience, I think it makes it kind of a crucial thing,
So this movie was written by Mary Sweeney, who was Lynch's editor and girlfriend for a long time. They did get married very briefly, but this was written between her and I think it was a childhood friend named John Roach. I don't know how they came across the story. Maybe they read it in a newspaper. I don't know. But for them to write it and then take it to David Lynch, my understanding is that they took it to David Lynch to see what they thought, what he thought of the script for them to pitch it around.
Okay.
And then, much like Wild at Heart, he read it and fell in love with it and said, I want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, he knew what he wanted to do with this. I think it's a great film.
Mm-hmm.
But I could maybe understand if I was Mary Sweeney or John Roach being like, David Lynch wants to make this?
Right.
You might be a little nervous at the start of like, what could he do with this material?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously he knew what to do with the material, but coming off Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive,
Mm-hmm.
You might be a little nervous as to how dark he's going to take this material.
Sure. Definitely.
But why do you think this film is not as celebrated as it is? I think maybe because it hasn't been widely available for a while. It also, I think, David Lynch does normal, doesn't attract the Lost Highway, Inland Empire crowd.
Sure.
But at the same time, though, I would argue a real Lynch fan would put this in the top of his canon.
I know, I certainly do. I mean, it's about old people, for the most part. So, among older film goers or film fans, even older David Lynch fans, they might have had an interest in it right off the bat. I don't know. I mean, this is a kind of film that, like, I would show to my kids, and I think they'd get a lot out of it. I don't know necessarily that this is something I would watch, like, when I was first getting into film, like, college or like late high school into college and early adulthood. But, it's some of the best films that I've had experiences with were kind of by recommendations from other people that I might not necessarily found myself, So I feel like this film has, from what I've experienced, some good staying power among, I don't know, the people who I, have known in my life who just like good films in general. I think a lot of the people that I know who love this film aren't necessarily the Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive crowd at all. I mean, so.
Well, I just think it's interesting that this film is either not discussed or completely just thought less of because it's David Lynch's G-rated Disney movie.
Yeah.
And I would say, no, this deserves discussion as potentially his best film. I mean, I have a soft spot for so many of his other films, obviously, but it's hard to deny this film's power and assuredness behind the camera when in actuality you would think that David Lynch would be nervous as all heck making this movie because it's not the type of film he normally makes. And yet it completely comes from a place of love, forgiveness, and hope, which is something you don't normally see in a lot of his other films. Yes, you could say, yes, there are aspects of it, but this film is all that.
Yeah.
And I love that image of when Rose looks out the window and she sees the ball rolling down the sidewalk. It's very haunting, and it's that's the kind of imagery that Lynch brings to it, where you go, "Oh, that is definitely a painting right there."
Right, and then I think like you touched on earlier, seeing this for the first time, you kind of get the sense, if you're familiar with David Lynch's other work, that, oh, is something creepy going to happen now? Like, do we need to be nervous? Do we need to be concerned for the boy chasing his blue ball? Is there something, just like with these images, like, is there, you never know when he's going to maybe sneak something uncanny or maybe a little creepy or even dangerous into the film. Like, that was my experience the first time, where I enjoyed it. I was in the moment very much, from start to finish, but I always had in the back of my head, like, oh, where's he going to take this? Like, do I need to be concerned? And there are those moments just outright, like we talked about the peril of the environment, or, oh no, something's wrong with the lawnmower, So, it's not like it's a film without danger or a film without, obstacles. There are several. But a David Lynch film or David Lynch obstacles, I think we can agree, are not your typical ones necessarily, So there's like the hint of that, perhaps kind of coming down in this film. I don't think anything is necessarily very creepy, but there's that feeling that it could turn that way. And I like that. I think it works.
Well, we know to expect the unexpected from him.
Definitely.
I kind of figured nothing too horrible was going to happen since it was G-rated.
Right.
But it is interesting that this movie was, came out 21 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, if a movie has this much smoking in it, it would be not G-rated, that's for sure.
Wow.
But Richard Farnsworth, he'd been in a lot of movies, started as stuntman. I think he was in was he in Anne of Green Gables? Was that I know he was in Rob Reiner's Misery.
Yes, he was. He was great in it,
Exactly. But he didn't do a lot of acting like in between. So I was happy to see that, him in this, and it seems like every line he says, he's saying. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel like he's ever reciting a script.
No.
And that's just, I think that when people talk about great performances in cinema, especially in the last, let's say, 30 years, you kind of have to throw Richard Farnsworth's name into the hat, for this film. But a lot of people haven't seen this film.
Right.
But it's hard not to be impressed with his performance in this movie.
I agree. He was nominated for best actor. Yeah.
He should have won.
Who won that year? Do you remember?
Kevin Spacey for American Beauty. Even though it's a great performance.
Yeah.
But people can't watch American Beauty anymore without having bad feelings. Honestly, and Kevin Spacey is one of those actors that, look, he would have been celebrated in another movie.
Yeah, I
know. Richard Farnsworth was probably not going to be in another film, especially a film this good right after. And shortly thereafter, he died. So.
Yeah. I did read that it came out later that he was in pain, like tremendous pain during the filming of this due to his, advanced cancer that he kind of kept a secret longer than anybody was aware. And that just kind of, adds another element to all this. How many hours was he working? How many times did he have to go? How many takes? Just like, was he, you almost feel, was he taking care of himself? But then this performance was, it's just amazing. And he really pulled it off, and, definitely successful. But
yeah, I don't think anybody knew how much pain he was going through.
It's too bad.
I'm happy that the production went fast enough that, that he didn't, get worse off as they went on. At least it wasn't a 6-month shoot or something like that.
Right. Or he held out. He made it. He not only did this wonderful performance, he didn't just last through it. He did it with gusto.
Right, and he made it to the Oscars. So.
Right. Yes.
I love this scene with him and his daughter sitting underneath the stars, and again, the music is incredible, but it's I remember staying in the theater, hearing this music and hearing him talking about the stars and going, there's no way as a filmmaker you can make a cut at this point. It has to be a dissolve. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it starts dissolving to the sunrise, and you go, yep, that's perfect. It's not I called it. I know how David Lynch makes his films. It's just well, there was no other way. There was no other way with that music and that imagery and that mood and that feeling. Mm-hmm. You cannot cut. That has to be a dissolve. And David Lynch is the master of the slow dissolve.
Mm-hmm. It's nice.
I like all his little elderly buddies in town.
Yeah.
They're small parts, but they're again, there's a lot of characters, a lot of personality in all these supporting small roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are you doing, Alvin?
Right. Just running right out alongside him,
Yeah, And I like the fact too that it's kind of like a stop start. He like gets a little bit down the road, and then the tractor breaks down, and then he has to come back to town.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of my favorite moments is coming after he comes back to town.
Oh, where he meets Big Ed.
Yeah, and another little kind of Lynchian moment with fire,
which is
well, hang on. Oh, that's nice. Yeah. See, I mean, these fields are part of my childhood.
But it's also kind of a joke, right? I mean, it's like you have him riding down the road, the camera pans up from the sky, and then comes back down, and he's moved like 5 feet.
Poor Albie.
We're Lynch is trying to, give us this grand epic vision, and then reminding us this is going to be a long journey.
Yeah.
But he has like the little kid and his mom like waving at him, and from doing the laundry, and I mean it rides right up to that line between like being like really Norman Rockwell corny and like being true. Just because the kid's like waving like so like enthusiastically, but you figure this kid's probably homeschooled. He doesn't see a lot of people.
Right, he doesn't get out much.
Here it is here with the dog. It's like it's very much like that seems like a David Lynch photograph. And and Alvin's knack for always grabbing like hot dogs and things like that. and offering people wieners, as he calls them, which is quite amusing. I haven't heard. I remember when he said that, I was like, oh my god, I've not heard people referred to hot dogs as that since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
But these sweeping images of the field and how it comes down from the sky and then it like flies across the field. It's like it's very cool. It's I don't know. It's very it's not really a shot that you would think that David Lynch would do, but it's the right choice.
Yeah. He loses his hat.
So that's I think that's kind of like one of the big moments when the semi drives by and you see his hat fly across the screen, almost like Bobby Peru's head.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my, no, because I remember a friend of mine was like, oh no, he's going to get off the tractor to get the hat and he's going to get hit by a car.
Oh no.
So I maybe as the film goes on, you don't get this feeling, but maybe at the start, you do kind of get the vibe that something horrible could happen at any second.
Yeah. Well, and it's like he's, like you said, no one else could have done this, I don't think. But Farnsworth, he's just got a very charming, inviting way about him. Like, it doesn't take much to get us aligned with him. It doesn't take much to get us rooting for him on his side, So then you're invested. You're rooting for him. You want him to succeed. And then every little moment, you're like, oh, he's old. He doesn't walk very easily. He needs his canes to help him. He smokes too much. Like you said, a semi could hit him. Like, there's so many things that could mess this up, and we're right there with him every step.
I don't think there's a moment in this film where you're not with him. I think that the moment he's kind of even telling the doctor, like, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. A lot of people feel that way because they're just like, right. don't tell me what to do. I'll handle it. I'll figure something out. I think it's just, I think this movie is sort of an ode to, the human spirit of like just wanting to persevere and keep going and not let your physical ailments define you, let your own soul, if you will, define your story.
Sure. I got a job that needs doing. I'm going to do it.
Right. And even like the bus. I mean, the bus isn't like a mixed bag. It's a bus of senior citizens. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's sort of a feeling until Alvin gets out of town and like sees some kids and stuff like that and some young people.
Mm-hmm.
There's almost a feeling in this film, at least at the start, that while this is a very peaceful, relaxing place, it's almost a place that is dying because every single person is elderly. like this is not only just a story about, you know, an elderly person. This is a story about an elderly way of life, an elderly town, and this way of life is changing.
Well, that's true. And this was in '99. Imagine, you know, how
right.
it's
amazing to think this movie is over 20 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think this movie, followed by Lynch's theatrical version of Mulholland Drive, probably the most successful time in his life since, you know, the Twin Peaks Wild at Heart days. It was a more understated time. Even though, like, you know, he was getting all these accolades at the same time, though, after Mulholland Drive, he like disappeared for 6 years until he came out with Inland Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would disappear for 10 years until he came out with Twin Peaks: The Return.
Mm-hmm.
So you would think with all the digital stuff, yes, I know he did DavidLynch.com and all that, but he really slowed down after this movie, because he had already shot Mulholland Drive prior to this movie.
Mm-hmm.
So
here we go.
So about 20 years, he, you know, didn't. He did. Obviously, Twin Peaks: The Return was a lot, but I'm just saying he didn't. It wasn't like he produced like Straight Story. Mulholland Drive should have given him like 4 or 5 more movies, and he scaled back.
Yeah, his little girl was born, I'm guessing, in like the 2000s, maybe late 2000s.
Yeah, Lula.
Yeah, classic.
So what's this image you were talking about with the fire?
Does he have his gun? Did you see him shoot it?
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, and one thing I do remember when we watched this in the film class was, you know, things are kind of going along in a certain way. Things are kind of peaceful, you know, and then boom, you know, you kind of get alarmed seeing him walk through the house with his shotgun, and then.
But it makes you laugh.
It does.
So we have Everett McGill showing up. He's not playing Big Ed, but for all practical purposes, he is Big Ed.
Big Ed.
It's always wonderful to see him, and I remember the audience was just like very happy because you could tell who the Twin Peaks fans were.
Oh, for sure.
But this movie, in a strange, kind of funny way, is a giant. You could not ask for a better commercial for John Deere,
right?
Lawnmowers than this movie.
Yeah.
I can only imagine when they got the script for this movie, because obviously they had to get permission to use their product.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were like, "Oh my goodness, this is like, you know, if Top Gun was the recruitment movie for the Navy, this would inspire everybody to get a John Deere." I remember at the movie theater, people are like, before they go see the movie, what kind of lawnmower is this guy driving across the state? And I said, it's a John Deere. John Deere, huh? Yeah, that'll do it.
Wow,
you know?
all right.
I was like, all right, well, I mean, it was already like a respected brand before the movie, obviously. Like, people were like, yeah, that's a good brand. Do that.
Oh yeah. Yep. There is a dealership outside the hometown, the small town 5 miles away from my hometown, looked just like Big Ed's dealership. Like, lined up in rows, green, lovely machinery.
Oh yeah. And then off he goes again.
Yep. Part 2. Take 2.
Yeah, it's funny because, you know, Lynch's work, you know, whether it be like the cityscape of Los Angeles or the woodsy areas of Twin Peaks or whatever, This movie doesn't really have any of that. It's all just long roads, flat lands, little hills here and there. But for the most part, just, rain comes. He's got to find a barn to park his tractor in.
Mm-hmm.
It's not usually Lynch's place to shoot things, but this is where he grew up, so he knows it. I mean, keep in mind, this is a guy who lived in Philadelphia and Los Angeles and made a Razorhead and The Grandmother and all that. And the next thing he knows, he's doing 19th century Victorian London for The Elephant Man, and he somehow knew how to find that time and place. And I think it also, because when he shot The Elephant Man, so many of the hospitals and houses they shot him were still period centric. So you could almost let the environments talk to you.
Sure.
Which is what he always says, about letting things talk to you. You can see if you were in those hospitals, seeing them lighting the gas and candles and stuff for the hallways, you would be like, oh, must have been what it felt like, because this is what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously he did that. So, this is something we talked about on our Wild at Heart commentary, but it's just amazing to me the feeling of time and space that he's able to do. I mean, yes, we're watching this movie, but we're also feeling this movie all the way through. And I don't mean just like the teary-eyed moments, but the like every part of Alvin's journey feels and plays differently, depending on who is he around and where he is in the story. And it's just, I think this movie was a moderate hit for Lynch, but it definitely was, I would say, his most respected film in a long time. Maybe not by the fans, but because they didn't see it, but definitely by the critics. I mean, this was the first film that Roger Ebert gave David Lynch 4 stars. He had always given him like 2 stars or 1 star before. He was not a fan of his work. Straight Story turned it around. Straight Story and then Mulholland Drive, both those got 4 stars, and then after that, Ebert was a fan.
Well, and I think maybe Ebert, like the rest of us, I think we all have, as David Lynch fans, we all have that film or that event that kind of sealed the deal, Yeah, like this is the guy for me. I like what he's doing. I want to see more, whatever. I mean, we talked last week about that period where it was Blue Velvet, Twin Peaks, and Wild at Heart. And my chronology of that was Wild at Heart first, then Twin Peaks, and then Blue Velvet. So I kind of did it in reverse. Had I been exposed to, say Blue Velvet first, or maybe I missed the boat and maybe got in at, Lost Highway, I might have had a different experience. I might have had a lot of different things to say about David Lynch as a filmmaker and an artist. As it turns out, I got lucky and I saw the film that was kind of more for me at that time in my life than any of the others would have been. I mean, I think ideally I would have probably picked Twin Peaks as my first experience in the David Lynch world, because I could have started a little bit younger. But yeah, I mean, if this is your first experience with David Lynch, I feel like it's inevitably going to be a positive one. You know what I mean? I mean, I can't see any real criticism of this film at all.
I've just seen people talking about the slow pacing, but I mean, how fast can you make it when a guy's on a lawnmower?
Good point.
This scene, maybe just because I got like a soft heart. I don't know, but this scene with the pregnant teenager just gives you. I mean, like you're in this movie, you're involved in this movie. This is the scene, I think, where people start to realize, oh, this movie's gonna have power to it.
Yeah.
And I think it's it's expanding upon a universal truth that a lot of people know about this whole thing about, like, you know, break the stick you can, break the set of sticks you can't, and that's family, he says.
Mm-hmm.
But it's with, you know, this girl is in a sad place in her life, and he knows that too.
Mm-hmm.
He's giving her this wisdom from his own life, but again, it's the conviction and the delivery of those lines. Maybe if someone else just said that line, you'd be like, oh wow, that's a nice line. But Richard Farnsworth delivers it to her and us because he's looking not maybe at us directly, but more or less towards us, almost like you wish your grandfather was.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think there's a part of this film that kind of plays on that, because everyone in this movie is elderly. You kind of approach looking at everybody as if they're your grandparents. Mm-hmm. And this is their kind of message to us about you need to, you know, not take advantage of the or you know, of the small, don't you know, I'm losing my train of thought here. You know, don't worry so much, and be a good person, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. And I think that bridges that gap between the generations too, that, like, you know, we've all had experience with, like the teenage girl, like, I'm not going to listen to you. What kind of insight could you possibly have into my life? And it turns out, you know, Alvy's lived a long time. He's probably had situations, maybe not exactly like the one she's dealing with, but, you know, I feel like the youth dismiss a lot of what the older people try to impart.
Well, I mean, look at Twitter right now, right? Everything's okay, boomer.
Right. But I feel like this exchange and, you know, the way this dialogue is working is that he's not trying to preach to her. He's not being presumptuous. He's just trying to talk to her. And in the end, they're just two human beings sitting by a fire, you know, sometimes
eating hot dogs.
Right. You know, food and experience. Would that it was all that simple, you know, for everyone.
Well, he's saying, like, you know, I'm not familiar with your little problem. He basically hints that he knows what's going on. And what are you doing? And of course, he breaks the tension wonderfully by saying, I don't know anything about your life, but I do know that you know, hot food in a you know, room at home is better than sit on the side of the road eating hot dogs with an old geezer.
Right.
So the fact that he's calling attention to himself and that, it breaks whatever tension there is there. Mm-hmm. I think what he says, followed with the humor he has, I think that's what cracks through, you know.
Right. Well, and a lot of, you know, those of us who work with teenagers know that you're not going to get any ground talking at them. A lot of times they just want someone who they think is listening to them, you know? And I feel like he makes the connection. He, you know, wins over her trust, and then she's able to, you know, be a little bit more of herself, and, you know, they learn about each other. They get to know each other slightly.
So this also kind of establishes a pattern in the film of him coming in contact with another person, and then he doesn't necessarily help everybody, but he, you know, makes a connection with that person. And so it's sort of like showing that while he's on this journey, he's sort of like, you know, Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz. He's going to be meeting these people along the way,
touching their lives,
and then moving on.
Mm-hmm. And is that a metaphor for all of us, you know, like to just look at how we're all able to do that? I mean, we all have that kind of power, right? Every interaction we have.
Exactly. I mean, every person you meet is a chance to make a connection.
For sure.
You know. But I think it gives him a lot of happiness when he wakes up in the morning and sees that she's gone.
Yes. And she leaves a little message, which is kind of sweet and clever.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like, if you go on any of the David Lynch websites or Facebook pages, whatever, it's all Twin Peaks, Twin Peaks, Twin Peaks, Twin Peaks, Twin Peaks. It's not Wild at Heart. It's not The Straight Story. You know, you'll get some Eraserhead stuff, some Blue Velvet stuff, but for the most part, Wild at Heart and Straight Story, which is the two commentaries we've done so far, are his least talked about work, even though I would argue, you know, both of them in their time were very much celebrated as being, you know, we talk about Straight Story, The Elephant Man being works that you could get into if you weren't a David Lynch fan. But we talked on the Wild at Heart commentary, that's a pretty easygoing film for a lot of people to get into. I mean, yeah, you're not going to show Wild at Heart to the person you're going to show The Straight Story to right away.
Right.
But for a David Lynch film, Wild at Heart is very digestible. If you just like, you know, weird, cool little movies. I mean, you know, it's not like you have to. He's not testing your patience and your brain power and all that.
Right.
This movie either. This movie, you know, you don't. This is a movie to sit and watch and experience, not sit and watch and decipher.
Right. And I think that, I mean, that's interesting to know what kind of fandom is maybe more successful or just more prolific, I guess, on social medias and whatnot. You know, it kind of just gives you the, you know, idea that there are different kind of Lynch fans, just like there are different kind of like Kubrick fans. You know, do they want that deciphering experience? Like some people very much do. Like they want to go into this David Lynch experience and be completely thrown, disoriented, and just taken for, you know, basically a ride that nobody is going to be able to explain for them. Like for a lot of people I know, that is the appeal. And like you were saying, if it's too straightforward or if they feel like they're being spoon-fed, then to them that's just not the Lynch experience that they signed on for. And I can completely respect that. Other people are going to have too difficult of a time with, you know, experiences like that. Like I don't want to have to wonder which version of this character, you know? So like I'm lucky because I'm very mutable. I can be either one. I could be both of those things. And I have a good time no matter what I'm watching. But I do feel it's unfortunate that some people have just, you know, that the larger fandom has left these films kind of behind because like we've been saying, they're great films. They've got a lot of, I mean, they're just aesthetically brilliant. The music, like we were talking about, these performances. And I feel like Lynch's, you know, auteur thumbprint on these are just, they're really well done.
And you can totally tell that David Lynch made this film.
For sure.
This isn't a film where you go, well, this looks like a studio for hire film, and Lynch kind of came in and did it. I mean, this is, without a doubt, a David Lynch film from beginning to end. His thumbprint is on it all the way through. It is not Inland Empire. It is not Twin Peaks: The Return. But the material never called for it to be that either. I think that he shows that he can direct a lot of different things and still maintain the Lynch aesthetic.
Yeah.
And I wish that he would do this kind of thing more often. I wish that we could see a David Lynch, you know, I understand Wild at Heart works as like romance and comedy and all that, but I would love to see a David Lynch romantic comedy. You know, what would a When Harry Met Sally type of film be like in Lynch's hands? I know he could do it if he was engaged with the material.
Right.
I mean, he has shown through a lot of his work that he can handle so many different tones, so many different moods, that he can do it if he wants to do it. He just has to want to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, if he did do it when Harry Met Sally, like the first image that popped into my head is like Audrey Horne, like just swaying her hips around the cafe, to open a scene. But yeah, that would be cool just to see him do more of this. I'm with you 100%.
We have some more swooping shots of the fields. He must have had a great time with that helicopter operator.
Oh, wow. And there's and then the silhouette of your film poster.
Yes.
So beautiful. And I think one of the other things that we talked about in the class is, like given the slow pacing, the relaxed pacing, let's say, given the fact that, he's going, 250 miles between Iowa and Wisconsin, that's where I think the score really kind of plays into kind of bridging that gap where you never get tired of seeing him on that mower, no matter how the landscapes change, if it's raining, if it's sunny, who's passing him by, you got that kind of accompaniment to just kind of keep you going, and it entertains you, but it's just part of the whole experience too. It's just done so well.
Yeah, and of course this moment with all the bikes.
Yeah.
And then we get the aerial shot and shows just how many bikes are going past them.
Right.
And all that, because at first you're like, what's that? And then of course there's the joke of the people on like the almost looks like unicycles going past.
Right. And he's so excited by it. It's he's an old guy, but a lot of this too is you see, his kind of lighthearted, childish side too, like they're just bikes, but they're exciting, and they're exciting to us because
it's also the first like sign of life he's seen in a while too, apparently. So
definitely, it's just a spectacle for him.
And then, and then we go to, he like kind of stops at their encampment.
Yes.
And they're like throwing the football, and they're just like, so what's it like to be old?
Yeah, I mean,
like, wow.
Come on, guys.
In 1999, it was a big year for a lot of movies, but Oliver Stone released Any Given Sunday that same year, which was another film that was preoccupied with aging and retirement and getting older. Mm. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, like these poor directors are going through like a late midlife crisis, realizing they're getting older. Mm-hmm. And then of course you cut to 21 years later, and they're still making stuff. So it's almost like they freaked out and like at the dawning of the millennium, and then they kept going.
Right. Like Oliver Stone's watching Strangelove with Putin. He's
yeah, that's gone into interesting territory.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. Like they're like, what's it like getting old? And what's the worst thing about getting old? And he's like, remember when you're young. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh my goodness, like, and again, but it reinstates like this a feeling of sadness, a feeling of melancholy.
Mm-hmm. And in a lot of ways, kind of allowing Alvy to not only express that, but to, feel it himself. What would he be, the silent generation or the greatest? I don't know how old he is, but, it's just kind of refreshing. Like we said before, this journey could maybe be the catalyst that brings all this out for Alvy to express. But, he's honest and it's true. Like, I'm not that old yet, but I remember everything about when I was young. I can't imagine that's going to get any better. You remember, you miss some of that stuff. Like, you long for it, but it's true. It's the truth.
So I believe we're coming up to, is it the Deer Woman, or is it, I can't remember.
I think so.
Well, we're coming up to staying with the other neighbor that he ends up staying with for a while in the film. And there's this wonderful Lynchian moment of an entire family sitting on the side of their house in lawn chairs watching firefighters putting out a fake fire. Like this is their entertainment. It's not an actual fire. I mean, it is a fire, but it's a staged fire. Right. But it's like, here, let's just sit around and watch these. To me, it's like, that is David Lynch personified right there. It's Americana just sitting on the side of the road watching a house burn.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. It's the deer woman.
All right. So this is probably the most Lynchian of the Lynchian moments in the film. Because I remember a friend of mine watched this with me and he had to get one thing in, didn't he?
He had to get one in. Yeah. Well, I mean,
but it's just, I think the scene is played as humor. I don't think the scene is supposed to be kooky and weird. I think it's just like, she's just erratic, you know? Right. I remember Entertainment Weekly said, you won't get a log lady in this movie, but you'll get a deer woman.
Well, and I mean, there are those people in life. Like
that's what I'm saying. Like it's maybe the closest thing to something you would see in a normal David Lynch film, but it doesn't break the spell of this film. Right.
Yeah. You know, and there's that kind of ongoing uncanny theme of car accidents, you know?
Well, and then he also kicks the deer, and then it shows them having dinner at the.
Yeah.
That great joke where she looks at the fields and goes, "Where do they come from?" Like you would think you would see these deers just like charging towards your car, you know?
Right. Well, they do come out of nowhere. I had to drive down to Iowa once to pick up a trailer for my dad, and it was probably like 8 a.m. 2 little fawns came right out of nowhere, jumped a fence, came out into the road, and were gone. I was going slow enough, but yeah. Yeah.
It probably. What do you think the budget for this film was?
Oh, I don't know. I mean,
it probably couldn't have been too much, because these kind of towns, I'm sure. Like, look, there's a town that's about 3 hours north of me, and they told me for $30 that I could get a permit to shoot anywhere for a month. In their town, right? Now, obviously, Los Angeles and New York not going to be like that,
right?
So, if that's California, if there are towns saying you can do that in California, I can't imagine what Iowa and Wisconsin are charging for film permits. There's probably no one even driving down some of these roads.
No, I mean, honestly, you know, I mean, so much of this is outside. I mean, how much does it cost to get a helicopter? I suppose, or you know,
well, you would just get a local, you know. Person, you know, there's probably a local airport, and
right, some crop duster guy who maybe knows a guy.
Well, all they got to do is fly, you know, and the cameraman's gonna do it. So, all right, so let's take a look at this. Okay, we don't know the budget, but worldwide it made $6 million.
Okay.
Okay, so wow, domestically it made 6,203,000. Internationally, it only made 213,000.
Huh.
So worldwide, 6,416,000. So internationally, this movie did not play at all. It tanked.
Wow.
So would you say that this film is primarily an American story? I don't think they advertised it correctly then. Because this is a universal human story,
right? Well, who is it? Is it Alexander Payne who did? Is it Omaha?
Was it in Nebraska?
Nebraska, yeah. I can't remember. A few years back.
That was black and white too.
Yes, it was. I remember when that came out. My husband has family in both Nebraska and Iowa, and the talk about surrounding that film was pretty substantial because so many people were excited to go and see, the familiar, what was going to happen with this story that, just happened to be in environment that they were familiar with. I don't know necessarily that that was the case with this. And he's going down the hill.
This is one of the scariest moments of the whole film.
Yeah.
Him losing control of the tractor. And also there's the way Lynch films it. It's very erratic.
Yeah. Yeah. Blood pressure went up a little bit there.
But to cut from this to this is when the family is watching the
yes, the fire.
And I don't, right off the top of my head, I don't know this actor's name, but the guy who plays kind of the husband and father of the guy he's going to stay where he stays with, I think him and Alvin. I mean, like Alvin connects with everybody, but they really have like a great like friendship, and it only lasts like 15 minutes, and yet you totally would think that they are going to be friends for life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So just in comparison, Mulholland Drive made $7 million in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
and $13 million overseas.
Mm.
So Mulholland Drive did okay in the U.S., but it doubled overseas for a $20 million worldwide take. You would not think that Mulholland Drive would have a better overseas. I mean, I guess, France loves David Lynch and all that, but
yeah,
it just seems strange that The Straight Story would bomb overseas, but make $6 million here. But Mulholland Drive, they didn't bomb here in the United States, but $7 million is like not a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems interesting that Mulholland Drive did okay. I mean, and I say that very kindly, okay here in the U.S., but overseas it doubled.
Well, I mean, I suppose it goes to support the idea that maybe internationally and to a point domestically, people like their Lynch weird. And this was maybe just too sane, like you said, too slow and too sane.
I also think that Walt Disney Pictures did not promote that it was a David Lynch film.
Probably not.
No, I know they didn't. It just looked like something like McFarlane USA or one of those movies that they make, where it's just like, oh, it's just a heartwarming story that Disney puts out, like Never Cry Wolf or, something like that.
Right.
Yeah, because they're not going to come out going, a David Lynch film, The Straight Story. It's not going to happen. Although it probably would have made more money.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame.
Well, I mean, I don't think he has anything to feel embarrassed about regarding this movie.
No. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a great movie. He made the movie he wanted to make, and by all measures, then it was a success.
I mean, if it wasn't for Disney kind of always wanting control over their stuff, this movie is primed to be in the Criterion Collection.
Sure.
Just as well as Badlands and Days of Heaven was for Terrence Malick. So.
Mm-hmm. Huh.
But I love the whole movie, but this little section here I adore, because this is where he meets the guy. They talk about their World War II experiences. But this collection of people, like, they just immediately embrace him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like who's this old man that came roaring down our road in a lawnmower? And they just go, oh, you can stay here, and oh no, I'll just set up camp over here, and he's so not wanting to be intrusive.
That's a very Midwestern thing.
Yes. But I also think that his relationship with the neighbor here, this is where Twin Peaks: The Return got when Cooper says goodbye to Bushnell Mullins and says, like, I want to thank you for, your kindness to a stranger, basically, which is what happens here. But what I love too is Lynch casts, he casts really well on a lot of his stuff, but like this movie, these people are, with the exception of Richard Farnsworth and Sissy Spacek, and obviously Harry Dean Stanton at the end, full of unknowns, completely full of unknowns. And yet everyone feels so welcoming and nice. And like, it's not like someone's scowling and giving dirty looks. Like everyone just seems like really cool people to hang out with.
Really chill. And
yeah, it just seems like, wow, if you were going to crash on the side of the road, this is definitely the family to do it to.
Right, like the opposite of the Big Tuna environment and its people.
Can you imagine Alvin Strait landing in Big Tuna, and instead of Sailor and Lula at that table, he's just like sitting there, and Jack Nance shows up, and it's like, my dog barks something.
No.
It's like, what's going on over there, Alvin? That's a pornographic movie going on,
right?
Style.
Oh my god!
Oh my goodness!
Poor
all right, Disney would be like, okay, that's off our our distribution schedule.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Old 20s, old 10s.
I like that moose ashtray.
Yeah.
They offer him a ride to where he's going, and he turns him down. Obviously, I know you're saying that he's humble, but I think that Alvin is determined to do this the hard way. He cannot just arrive there. He has to earn it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he won't even come in to like use the phone.
Right.
He kind of looks like Major Briggs, doesn't he?
A little bit, yeah.
The DVD says, a true story that proves a little determination goes a very, very long way. That's such a Disney, like,
isn't it? Yeah.
Statement here.
Oh,
it says, Chicago Tribune says, the sweetest and most compassionate movie Lynch has ever made.
Okay.
I could get on board with that, although I think the Elephant Man might be there too. I don't know, but the Elephant Man has definitely darker moments, right? Mm-hmm. It says, this is one of the rare films offering powerful, uplifting entertainment for audiences of all ages. Directed by David Lynch, Wild at Heart, Twin Peaks. They say this on the Disney box. I'm not quite sure that would cause parents to rush out to you this way.
A certain kind of parent, maybe.
It says, but when the call comes to Alvin's estranged brother Lyle, Harry Dean Stanton, the Green Mile. Now, Harry Dean Stanton is in this movie for about 20 seconds. Right? And he's credited here. Filmed along the actual route of the real Alvin Strait traveled in 1994. The Strait story is a heartwarming and poignant drama chronicling Alvin's 6-week odyssey and the many lives he touches along the way.
Well, there you go.
So there's a nice little message from David Lynch on the DVD here. And he writes, I know that most DVDs have chapter stops. It is my opinion that a film is not like a book. It should not be broken up. It is a continuum and should be seen as such. Thank you for your understanding.
Oh.
And he would do this with Mulholland Drive too,
Mm-hmm.
where he wouldn't have chapter stops. And while that's admirable, it's also annoying as all heck, because sometimes you have to go to the bathroom,
Right.
and DVD players at that time, if you had pause on longer than, let's say, 5 minutes, it just would turn off.
Mm-hmm.
And then you turn your player back on, and then you'd have to start the movie over and then like fast forward to where you were.
That's annoying. Yeah.
So even though Inland Empire and Twin Peaks: The Return do not give you chapter stops that you can choose on your remote,
Mm-hmm.
you can once you hit play go to next chapter. Okay. So it doesn't give you an option on a table of contents page, mm-hmm. but you can go to a chapter like once you have it started.
Okay.
So I think that was his compromise.
Well, it's something.
Yeah, because I mean, how annoying is it to like you would just shut off and you'd be like, oh, now I have to fast forward all the way to that moment.
Yeah, that's pretty annoying.
The closet stuff to go.
Yeah, when I showed this film to my class, I think I was still getting Netflix disc.
Yeah.
I only canceled that like a year ago, by the way. I requested it from Netflix, and I don't know, because sometimes I would give them like a little, like, here's a teaser scene, or here's like the scene that I feel like we should really talk about. But this film, I think we just watched the whole thing from start to finish, because it's less than 2 hours, and the class is 2 hours.
So the overall reaction was a pretty positive one?
Yeah, I think they were surprised. A lot of them, like maybe half of them that had some like preconceived notions about David Lynch. Like, it's not my thing. He's just, he's a great director, but he's just not my guy.
He's weird. He's weird for doing weird.
Right. He's just too out there for me. Or I think one of them said, he kind of pats himself on the back too much, things like that. And I said, yeah, that's okay. Let's just kind of go into it with an open mind and see what you think. I didn't try to sway them or give them any information prior to the viewing, other than just try to watch it with an open mind, and you might be surprised by what you see. And I think they all were. I think that emotional element was something that none of them had counted on. Kind of that reflection on, like you were saying, like their lives, their relationships, all of that. And then I think a lot of them even brought it up in the discussion that we had, that you, meaning me, the instructor, are younger than we are. And obviously that would have been a very different experience for you, like just emotionally. And we talked about that because like the first time I saw it, probably like you, I was like pretty young, not in that frame of mind where I was reflecting on like relationships in my past, or, my parents. I didn't have any kids at the time, but yeah, I think it was a nice surprise. I think they all really enjoyed it and didn't necessarily expect that they were going to enjoy it. So that's always fun. It's always fun to like bring something to someone that they're not expecting and have it be positive.
Having seen this film and seeing what David Lynch brought to it, like I've always, like, when I watched Inland Empire and I watched Twin Peaks: The Return and stuff, while I enjoy those, those projects overall, I do miss Lynch. Like when we talk about Blue Velvet and Twin Peaks and Wild at Heart, there is emotion in there. It's not this kind of emotion, but there is emotion in there. I mean, Sailor and Lula, obviously, we feel that they actually do care about each other. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that I've noticed that he's backed away from over the last 20 years is he seems to have gotten more and more distance from his material. He doesn't engage with his characters quite to that level. I mean, there is some sort of longing, emotional kind of resonance there in terms of like the Dougie character in Twin Peaks: The Return. You definitely feel that like he's a lost soul in this big crazy world.
Mm-hmm.
But you could also argue that a lot of Twin Peaks: The Return by design is emotionally distant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be good for David Lynch if he was to do another film to explore this side of him again, because I think whether he doesn't have to do something, you know, quite on this type of, you know, simple story, but he has a talent for being able to create you know, extremely emotional resonant moments, and for some reason he decides not to a lot of the times. But when he can do it, when he does it, he can do it very well.
I agree. And I wonder then if there's something of, what would you say, like an emotional gas tank, if you will, that, you know, he has to put into, that gets, you know, it takes a lot, you know, writers, a lot of times kind of, it's very exhausting sometimes writing heavily emotional, heavy, you know, passionately emotional scenes. Like you do have to fill that with pieces of yourself. And I'm wondering if he's distant because, you know, as artists, we're all, you know, on different emotional levels. We all, you know, put a varying percentage of ourselves into our work. But I wonder what that's like for him. You know, I wonder if that's a piece of this, you know, where he did that successfully with Wild at Heart. He's done it successfully here. I wonder if it's just, you know, sometimes it's just too much, you know, and let's not forget that he's also, like, before he did film, he also was an amazing artist, you know, like, so, I mean, I feel like a lot of his work sometimes is just an extension of physical art, visual art, and the emotion is kind of just, you know, incidental if it happens.
Well, I think it's interesting because when people talk about his dark LA trilogy, Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, and Inland Empire,
Mm-hmm.
they go, oh wow, you know, after Twin Peaks, you know, he just went dark. Well, The Straight Story is the wrench in that. Yes. Because he did The Straight Story in between Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire. So he shows that he can reverse course entirely. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like, okay, he did this dark trilogy and then later on he made The Straight Story. Like, he made it smack dab in the middle of that trilogy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or thematic trilogy, if you will. So it shows that he can just completely, he can do Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, and he can do On the Air at the same time. One's completely stupid and comedic, and one, and he would even, I mean, calling it stupid is actually a compliment because that's what it is. And then Fire Walk with Me is very dark. Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting to see. So when people say, well, you know, let's say like Steven Spielberg, like when he went and did the last Indiana Jones movie, the argument was, well, after you do Schindler's List, Amistad, Saving Private Ryan, Munich, you can't go back to doing Indiana Jones because you've gone through hell. You know, you made all these really dark movies. You can't come back to, you know, Indiana Jones cracking the whip. David Lynch shows that he can do it if he wants to do it. He can tap into those elements. It's just, for whatever reason, he just, again, now Twin Peaks: The Return has emotion in it, but it's almost like stunted emotion. It's like you were on your way somewhere and then you got stuck for 25 years and that passage of time is gone and you don't know what to do about it.
Sure.
You know, but it's different. Dougie, while we observe that character is not aware of the tragedy of that character, except for the one moment when he sheds a tear when he sees Sonny Jim in the back seat of the car. But that's almost like Cooper, coming through at that moment. For the most part, it's just, I'm going to act completely removed from the world, and yet still touch the world, much like Forrest Gump, in a way.
Sure. Yeah.
Alvin Strait interacts with the world, touches everybody, but he's also aware of his strength as a storyteller and as a people person. If Alvin Strait was someone who hated people, this is a different movie.
Sure.
Alvin Strait, it shows that he enjoyed, the guys at the local hardware store and hanging around his daughter and things like that. So, now we just came off the scene of him talking with the guy over World War II, and again, it was a very powerful scene. A lot of people were tremendously moved by that, and then it's followed up by this. I believe this is Chris Farley's brother. And then you got these two bickering. I would say that this. Farnsworth keeps it real here. The two brothers are cute and funny, but you can definitely tell that Lynch is playing up the comedic here. He's trying, So when they talk about how there was more scenes of comedy in this film that were deleted, you can kind of get a feeling from this scene, like, oh, okay, this was kind of what they were maybe doing a bit more of.
Definitely.
But the fact that it's kind of like this comedic scene, and then Farnsworth undercuts it with, a brother's a brother, and again bringing in that emotion. And then of course with Badalamenti's music that kicks in, which is one of my favorite cuts, because then it just cuts to Farnsworth and the neighbor sitting there having a cigarette, and this next scene is. What I believe is that moment in Twin Peaks: The Return when I think it is a reference to that. So much of Twin Peaks: The Return has references to so much of David Lynch's work that you almost have to think, is season 3 of Twin Peaks a summation work? Was he reflecting on all of his work, because he started throwing in elements from several of his films. But he's kind of getting them to change the price. So he's a good haggler. He goes, how much was working and how much was fighting? Yeah, we're actually I don't believe we have too much more of the film. I think after this he stops at the cemetery, and then spoilers, he goes and sees his brother. I think one of the big suspense things of this film is his brother going to be alive when he gets there?
Yeah,
there is a feeling that he might get there too late.
Right.
6 weeks is a long time after someone had a stroke. And he's obviously not wired to the internet, so he doesn't, and the internet was still relatively new too, but it's not like his daughter can just reach him by cell phone. Right.
And then piggybacking on that, like, how is he going to be received once he arrives? What is there animosity still? Is he going to, how's the brother going to react? But,
well, this movie ends very quietly. I don't know if people were expecting some big brother blowout at the end of the film, or like a 10-minute fighting scene. I don't know, but
maybe. But that's also very Midwestern, like very downplayed, very okay, that's it, and seeing the end of the film. But
Well, it's almost like all the journey was the forgiveness. Like the fact that the way Harry Dean Stanton plays it is, if Alvin had been driven up in a car, they may have had some words.
sure.
But the fact that he saw that he had arrived on a lawnmower was all that needed to be said.
Yeah.
You know, so I get the feeling like, yeah, if he knew that if he showed up being driven there, you know, it was going to be a nastier scene, you know, too. Yeah, this whole thing of I want to thank you for your kindness to a stranger. It's been a genuine pleasure having you here, Alvin. This is straight up Cooper and Bushnell Mullins and all that in the hospital. And I remember watching that scene going, oh my goodness, he ate the straight story for this moment. Unbelievable. But it's good because it's a great moment.
Yeah.
And again, with the transition, I love this shot too of the neighbor looking through the window, drinking his coffee in the morning, because it completely looks like 5:30 in the morning. And again, this time and place, like, you know that feeling. It's 5:30 in the morning. The world is not woken up yet. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's much of a world around them anyway to wake up. But you know, but just the way it cuts to Alvin like turning left, and you see the air coming out of his mouth. I mean, you know it's cold. You know.
Yeah, he's lucky that the journey coincided with favorable season.
I don't think he could have done it in the snow, right? So
Nope.
But this movie does make you want to go visit a lot of these towns, or this kind of feeling. And I mean, living out in the Midwest, I mean, I know there's people everywhere, but are there towns like all over the place, you know, that do kind of feel like they've been forgotten about?
My hometown, Olivia, Minnesota, when I graduated high school, the population was 2,802. So in the last 25 years, that has gone down every time they updated the population sign at the city limits. They're just these little towns dotted from like Minneapolis to West Central. So, I mean, we go back there all the time, but they're teeny. They're these towns, you know, like main streets, hardware stores. Hardware stores probably don't even operate anymore unless they're like a national chain. What else?
I mean, has like Walmart come in and like just decimated those areas too, or is it just because people just move away?
Both. People move away, and then Walmart is the bigger communities, like maybe 20 to 30,000, they kind of qualify for a Walmart. And then all the people in the surrounding smaller towns drive in, you know, to Walmart. But I mean, in terms of like transportation, you know, there you have to have a car. There's no public transportation. There's no busing there. I mean, I'm guessing there are probably Ubers and Lyfts, but yeah, you have to drive everywhere. Everything is, you know, 20 miles away. Yeah, there's one grocery store that closes at 5 p.m.
Not open on Sundays?
They are open on Sundays, and then they stay open, at least when I lived there, they stayed open on Thursday nights till 8. But with the virus and whatnot, I think everybody's back on the probably 1950s schedule.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just small and
yeah. Real quick, this is one of Lynch's trademark moments of showing you know, the road. Only this time it's like, you know, the bottom of the bridge with the lawnmower.
Yeah.
Again, this is another suspenseful moment because you're thinking, oh, is Alvin going to get driven right off the bridge?
Yikes! Careful there.
I do like that he's got the deer antlers like on the back of his lawnmower now. You know,
I noticed that.
So And I like this moment too because you're like, oh, it's a cemetery, and then the priest is like, oh yeah, this is from like the 1600s and it's like, yeah, there's so much history in these areas that nobody talks about or thinks about, and it's amazing because Hollywood makes movies all the time. L.A., New York, maybe Chicago because it's easier in a city to get your crew over there, to get surrounding, crew members to, come in the area. I wish there were more movies that took place in these kind of areas, these kind of towns, because one, I think it'd be pretty cost efficient to make a movie in these areas. Two, it boosts their local economy like no other.
Absolutely.
To have people there. And two, I think there's a sense of like you were suggesting about a sense of pride of like seeing their areas portrayed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we had that a little bit with the Coen Brothers and Fargo. I mean, we all knew we were made into a complete mockery, but
Well, what's weird about Fargo is like it's about Minnesota, and yet it's named after North Dakota.
Yeah. But I mean, really, all the people, wherever. I feel like Frances McDormand, she sounds exactly like my mother-in-law. Like, you could put audio of both of them simultaneously and you wouldn't know who was who because they sound exactly the same, and always my mother-in-law has always spoken like that. So I was pretty young when that came out, and I didn't, again, get to it in the theater because I was still living in the town that had 2,800 people in it. But when I finally watched, it was like, oh yeah, look, the IDS Tower, and that's a, that Denny's is in Eden Prairie or, Burnsville. That even just saying the names of our little suburbs, it's meaningful. It's got, some appeal and sentimental value, I suppose. But yeah, I'm with you.
So I would say after he stops at the last neighbor's house and then with the priest, once you get to the priest, I like the scene a lot, and I think it's a great scene. But this is where people are starting to get a little restless, I think, with the movie, because they're like, how many people is he going to meet and talk to before we finally get to where we need to go?
Mm-hmm.
Because the priest tells him, oh, Lyle lives down the road.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the reason why that's the final reason why this scene actually made the cut and is in the movie. While I think it's a great scene, I think if it was just another Alvin talks to another person,
mm-hmm.
I think it would have been removed, and I think we would have gotten to his brother a little sooner. But as it is, I think it's great. But I do think that because of the pace, this scene is where people start getting a little bit like, okay, but it's like real. I mean, it's real quick. It's like 10 seconds of getting restless, and then they're back into the movie again.
Yeah.
So this is, I mean, this is sort of a key moment when he talks about him and his brother working his little kids out in the farm and all that. So,
mm-hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't think Lynch would cut this scene anyway, but Lynch has cut other scenes that I couldn't believe he's cut before too. So, sometimes if a movie's going too long, you have to do horrible things sometimes.
To murder your darlings.
I wonder how many takes they did of Farnsworth on this movie. I can't imagine. I would say no more than 2 or 3. I can't, because you cannot do this kind of, even though it's quiet emotion, it's still emotion. And, you don't want to, look, they're filming this on the real places where Alvin was. When it's cold, it's cold.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't have people in their 70s and 80s out there at night, like filming this scene. Because, they're not just there for 5 minutes. They're probably there at least 5-6 hours.
Yeah.
And even if they may have a trailer, I don't think they have, 17 trucks of trailers parked outside this like cemetery.
Right.
So it's, I while I think this movie obviously was made as a Hollywood type of film, even though it was done more independently, this isn't made with like the crew of like the Fast and the Furious or something like that. It's it's very Lynch has always been DIY anyway.
Sure.
Even though he's surrounded by people. I mean, if you watch any of those behind the scenes featurettes on whatever, he's always making lamps and doing, he's always like if you see the behind the scenes of Twin Peaks season 3, he was digging out the hole, in the woods that Mr. C would find like the bubbling lava in and stuff like that. He's not just ordering crew members to do it. He's doing it himself. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, close-ups like this on Richard Farnsworth is like, this is, I mean, that's like a Oscar clip written all over it.
Yeah. He's got to be getting tired.
Well, yeah, 6 weeks on the road on a lawnmower, outside too, braving the elements and all that.
Packer country.
Yeah. Some. Here, another stop. We're gonna stop and get gas and
talk to this guy.
Talk to this guy, yeah.
Huh.
Now this kind of reminds me of, even though it's a bar, it kind of has the feeling of the pilot version of the Double R Diner,
Right.
Like before it got brightly lit,
Right. Well, and that's what a lot of those old bars that are still standing in, like where I'm from, West Central Minnesota, a lot of them up in northern Minnesota where there's a lot of fishing and hunting, they still look like that. You know?
Sure. Why would they change?
They wouldn't.
But again, it's not like 20-year-olds running these bars, because the 20-year-olds are all moving towards the cities.
Exactly.
So you have people in their 70s and 80s still running these places. And why would they close them up? Because that's their only form of socialization.
Yeah.
They just run them until they no longer can stand, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And I'm, like we said earlier, I'm always invested in this story. I'm always with Alvy. But I think what you said earlier is true. You do start to get a little bit, come on, what's going on now? So this is the first time I've felt it personally right now, where I'm like, oh, should I go get a drink? How much longer we got here? But yeah.
Well, I think that's also the Lynch aesthetic is the testing of patience.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's saying, we're going to do this on my time.
Right. Kind of like the guy delivering milk to Coop right after he, before he gets shot. And
well, that was the defining moment of Twin Peaks, because not the solving of Laura's murder. It was Senior Drool Cup bringing the milk, because when I was growing up, because a lot of us were watching it.
Mm-hmm.
That was the moment where the majority of my friends' parents turned the show off and never came back, because they were just like, this is ridiculous. So in a weird way, that moment, because it opened season 2, more than the solving of Laura's murder, that's the moment that kind of killed the series for a lot of people, because they weren't wanting that.
Right. There's only so many.
And also, it was like Cooper going, does this include a gratuity? Like, he's like bleeding, right?
Yep.
So it's like trying to be amusing and funny in that moment as well.
Mm-hmm. And it was. I thought it was. But yeah, I can see where.
But if you watched it live the night it aired,
yeah.
I remember, like, because when it first starts, you're like, okay, cool, Twin Peaks season 2, here we go.
Yep.
And then it was like, it grinded to a halt right in the first 5 minutes of the show, right?
Oh,
if that had happened, let's say 2/3 of the way through the episode, okay. But to begin your season 2 premiere with that, while it is amusing and funny, you have to admit that is a dangerous way to like toy with people right at the start, you know.
You're right.
So he wanted to do it. He's you've seen that familiar moment from the behind the scenes of season 3 of him screaming, who cares how long a scene is?
I have, yes.
Well, while it's amusing and funny too, at the same time though, like people do care about how long a scene is, because it has to be the right length. Can't be too short, can't be too long. It has to be just right. Right? Sure. Baby Bear says just right. So here we are at the ending.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like Lynch testing your patience again by having him run out of gas.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you just go, wait, is this going to be the end of the movie? He's just going to just sit there on the side of the road?
Right.
Because what's he going to do? Is he going to just grab both canes and just start hiking down the road? I mean, like, there's nothing else he can do.
Right.
So he just sits there. And then what's funny is the other tractor comes up and goes, oh, who you're looking for is just right around the corner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he didn't even realize where he was.
Right.
Because there was no such thing as Google Maps back then. To say you are 30 feet from your destiny.
Exactly. Got it going again.
I like this environment of just like elderly people just driving tractors down the road.
Mm-hmm.
He's getting a personal escort to his brother's house too.
Isn't that nice?
So everyone wants like props from movies and things like that. I want to know who got the lawnmower and the trailer,
right?
The tractor trailer. I mean, to me, I'd love to have Alvin Straight's tractor and trailer here just as much as I would want the Back to the Future DeLorean. It's like, to me, this is a defining film vehicle.
Yeah.
I wonder if Lynch has this like stored away in some.
I hope so.
Garage. Yeah, he's lucky he doesn't like fly down the hill, that hill too.
Right.
Well, here we are at the ending. Do you think it was a good thing? Okay, look, we're all fans of him. Is it a good thing or a bad thing to cast Harry Dean Stanton at the end of the movie?
I loved it. I mean,
like, look, we all love Harry Dean Stanton, but at the same time, though, it's almost like it almost takes you out and goes like, oh yeah, this is a movie,
right?
When Harry Dean Stanton, because at this point we haven't seen a familiar actor in over an hour.
That's true.
In this movie, you almost want the brother to be just another person.
You do, but I feel like because the conclusion is so brief, I think it was the right choice, and now we can all sit with our, let's have more, like,
yeah.
You see Harry Dean Stanton, you just naturally want him to, say something bizarre or do whatever he's going to do.
But the thing is,
water, Carl, or whatever,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. When he first comes out of this movie, I thought he stopped at the Fat Trout trailer park and Carl Raw was going to come out to yell at him.
Right. That's what we're all hoping for secretly. But yeah.
And it made me worry too, because obviously we see Harry Dean Stanton in Twin Peaks season 3. Mm-hmm. But when you see him in this movie, I thought, my God, Harry Dean Stanton's so old. Like he's gonna die soon.
Right.
I didn't know that we, still had 20 years of Harry Dean Stanton left to go.
Right. And to be honest, when I first saw this, again, it was on the small screen. I didn't know it was Harry Dean Stanton until the camera pulls in close, because he's got a cap on. He's,
Right.
He looks raggedy, and it's far enough away where I didn't identify it as, I didn't look at the cast or anything before I watched. But then when you get the close up on his face, I'm like, oh yeah, hi.
And what's ironic is that right now, with everyone quarantine and self-isolation, what Lyle's wearing is what a lot of us wear on a regular basis now.
Right. Yeah.
I think he also had to go with a known actor like Harry Dean Stanton, because he has to look at the tractor trailer and actually emote, and that would be harder to do with maybe an unknown actor.
Yeah.
Whereas Harry Dean Stanton, we talked about in Wild at Heart, his eyes are such a powerful instrument.
They are. That last line, I really, really like it. Like, I just...
What, I did, Lyle?
Yeah. The question and then Alvy's response, like... And then the tilt up.
Yeah, they don't show them like hugging or holding hands or
No.
Now I'm trying to figure out why they're looking up at the sky except to give Lynch an ending.
Right.
Because the stars aren't out and
Right. Oh well.
But much like the Elephant Man, it ends with the stars at night. I mean, it begins with the stars at night, but again, but see now the stars keep going, like start moving through the stars. That's how the Elephant Man ends as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this is sort of a bookend to the Elephant Man
in
Lynch's filmography.
I like it.
I especially like it too, where it. I'm waiting for the first credit to come up here because it takes a moment here. But I do like the star effect. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Harry Dean Stanton as Lyle. That makes me laugh so much because it's like he's in it for like 20 seconds and he gets a full on like big credit at the end.
Right. Max the Wonder Dog as Farm Dog.
In memory of Alvin Strait. Can you just imagine Alvin's family hearing that David Lynch was going to direct his story? You'd be like, okay.
Hold on. Yeah.
But again, but see, it's interesting because, like I said, Jack Fisk and Sissy Spacek, they worked on Eraserhead with Lynch. Mm-hmm. And now they returned to help him with the Straight Story. I mean, I think it helped having Sissy Spacek attached to this film because she's had a hell of a career, but I mean, the fact that she's the coal miner's daughter definitely helps tell Midwestern tales. Mm-hmm. And I think people have a lot of respect and trust in her choice of material.
Sure.
So I think that when they heard that she was involved, they're like, oh, okay, But also, if you go through Lynch's filmography, an actress like Sissy Spacek, while she does take a lot of risks in her career, it would be very hesitant to sign on to do the Straight Story with David Lynch without prior knowing David Lynch as a human being. Sure. I think because she knew who he was and because she knew that he was friends with her husband, I think it helped convince her that this was a good thing. Whereas if she didn't know David Lynch at all and he was going to make the Straight Story, you might wonder what kind of movie are you making. I mean, a similar thing happened when Wes Craven was going to do Music of the Heart, and Meryl Streep was like, Wes Craven is making this movie? What kind of movie is this going to be? Because I don't know if you remember that movie, but it's about a teacher who teaches inner city kids how to play classical music.
Yes, I do.
So to have the director of Scream and Nightmare on Elm Street directing, but much like Lynch and the Straight Story, Wes Craven was a teacher. he was a professor before he became a film director.
Mhm.
So he obviously knew the knowledge of working with headmasters and districts and things like that. So I think if you have a personal connection to the material, you can do it. And I think one of the big problems that we have in any sort of creative life, whether you're an artist or an author or a filmmaker, is people think you can only do one type of thing.
Sure.
When you can do a lot of things. The question is, will people give you the chance to do it? And two, are you willing to do it?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I think The Straight Story is an excellent example of what an artist can do when he chooses to do something different and believes in himself to do it.
Amen.
So, all right. Well, we're at the end credits. Any last thoughts on The Straight Story?
I think we've covered pretty much everything. I would just say, hey, if you are hesitant or if it just wasn't on your radar, give it a shot. Just allow yourself to experience this film. I don't think you'll be disappointed.
Yeah, and I would just say that while we acknowledge a lot of Lynch's work is fantastic and great, I think The Straight Story can be argued that it's even greater because of how underseen it is. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, whenever something is underseen and underappreciated, you tend to want to show it more to people because you're like, I know you've seen Twin Peaks. I know you've seen Mulholland Drive, but you haven't seen Lynch's full work as an artist until you see something like The Straight Story, because that, in reality, while he makes these like film noir, horror, mystery, surreal tales, I do believe that The Straight Story and the emotions that he injected into this film is who he really is at his heart. It's just that he doesn't show it too often.
Yeah.
So, all right, everybody, make sure you follow Anna on Twitter, television_lady, and also her blog, televisionlady.com. It was a genuine pleasure, and thank you so much for watching. Make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and share it wherever you'd like. All right, take it easy. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.